A Dream Not Come True by FireFly4. Part 3 of I Will Look Out For You If You Let Me. Victor was out of his bed and racing across the dark cabin with a shout of Nova! Seconds before the scream rang through camp, waking up every daywalker and vampire in a 100-foot radius. Vargas had just managed to blearily pull himself up and poke his head through the curtains of his bed to ask what Victor was yelling for when the scream had sounded. How Victor seemed to sense it coming, and how he even knew it was Nova in particular, no one could say. But the young vampire wasted no time in rushing down the stairs of his cabin, only the small size of the window keeping him from leaping right through it to get through the room faster. He blazed across the courtyard, the wind helping him, making him faster, thundering up the steps to the daywalker cabin as another scream, this time a terrified "No!" echoed through the night. He slammed the door open and nearly toppled to the floor as it swung much wider than the vampire cabin door did. The cabins, it seemed, were just slightly different in terms of layout, so where he was expecting the door to stop, it kept going, throwing off his balance. But he could not possibly care any less about how much of a fool he looked to the daywalkers in his stumble. His gaze was locked on Nova, the girl lying on her bed, twisting and turning, her blanket tangled around her like a warped cocoon. In the darkness, his vampire eyes saw her face was scrunched in the obvious throes of a nightmare. Tears were streaming down her face. He barely heard the muttering about how to wake her from the others as they stopped at his entrance. Victor! Nova cried out like she was sobbing, like her heart was being ripped out from her chest. He jolted into action, shaking himself from the flare of anger that had hit him at seeing Nova in such a state, wanting to destroy whatever it was that was causing her such distress. The way she called out his name. He knew it wasn't him who caused this nightmare, but something happening to him that was tearing her up inside. He pushed himself off the door, nearly flinging himself to kneel at Nova's bedside, causing the others to jump back out of the way. It was their last night at camp. They were meant to be recuperating from the toll of ending the war before they had been packing up to leave in the morning. They trusted him now, enough to see that he could help their future leader. His knees hit the hardwood of the cabin floor with a slam he knew would mean bruising tomorrow. But he barely thought about it, reaching out to take Nova's hand, the only part of her that had escaped the cocoon of blankets. It was like that was all that was needed. The second his hand touched hers, as soon as skin met skin, Nova gasped and scrambled to sit up, her eyes shooting open as she looked around frantically for something. It took even less than a second for her to spot Victor and nearly fling herself out of the bed and into his arms, forcing him to slide back to the ground as he had been moving to stand up and try to sit beside her on the bed at the same time. A bundle of blankets and Nova locked in his hold. He quickly tightened his grip when he felt her shaking in his arms, trembling in a way that only happened when someone was utterly terrified. Her face buried in his chest as her hands clutched at him, like she never wanted to let go of him. Hey, he murmured, nuzzling the side of her head. It's okay. You're okay. Nova shook her head against him. Victor! It sounded like she was begging, half frantic, half pleading. He seemed to understand. I'm okay too. But Nova pulled away, her gaze still a little glassy and hazy from sleep, and her abrupt awakening, but wide in their terror. He hit you! She said, starting to ramble, talking so fast he had to focus on her words, but not the fact that she was in his arms in order to hear everything. He threw a fireball! It hit you! You were protecting me, and he hurt you! You were hurt! He blinked, a little startled when Nova suddenly scrambled to the side, the blanket half falling around her waist to free her arms, as she began to grab at his dark red sleeping shirt, tugging and lifting like she wanted to lift it up and over his head, and would rip it off if she... and would have her way no matter if she had to actually rip it in half to get it away from him. He was completely fine with that, in any other circumstance than it being from her utter terror and fear, while it didn't seem like she was fully conscious of what she was doing. So he reached out to take one of her hands, pressed a kiss to it, and lifting the edge of his shirt with his other hand. Still modest enough to not scandalize the other occupants of the cabin, who had, thankfully, remained silent, but enough to show Nova that whatever it was she feared seeing on his abdomen or chest wasn't there. He had to swallow hard when her other hand came out to touch his chest, resting right over his heart. He knew she needed this reassurance, to feel it beating herself. But he was a teenage boy too, and the most beautiful girl he had ever seen was touching his chest. He took a breath, focusing, because this wasn't about him, and reaching out to take her hand, dropping his shirt, and pressing a kiss to it also. "I'm okay," he repeated, squeezing her hands, rubbing his thumb over her knuckles to further calm her. Seeing her starting to come around slowly but surely. "You saw. Not a scratch on me." That she knew of, anyway. He was pretty sure he had scratched up his back something fierce when they had both hit the ground, falling from the tower in the cauldron chamber. Seemed his side of the cave had a few more rocks than where she landed, but the healing rain took care of most of that. Nova stared a moment longer at his clothed chest, like she was trying to focus, like she was trying to pull herself fully awake, before it seemed to click into place. He saw her shoulders relax from the tension that held them taut, slumping as she finally calmed, before reaching out and hugging him tightly, now relieved rather than terrified. He pressed a kiss to the side of her head and looked around at everyone watching them. He knew Nova was her people's future commander, and he knew she wouldn't appreciate so many seeing her weak. "I'm going to get her some air," he told them, standing up, his arm around a shaky Nova as she stood with him. He would have liked nothing more than to scoop her up into his arms, blanket and all, and carry her out. But he didn't think she'd appreciate it in front of the others. Or at least, not right now. "Where?" one of the other girls began to say as they passed. "The counselors," she offered as an explanation. It wasn't that she didn't trust him, which he was grateful for. He knew the girl had been one of the few who stuck around and refused to go to war. She trusted them then, and she trusted him now. But she made a good point that if he took Nova anywhere, if they might not be back before breakfast or dawn, someone needed to know where to look for them, so the counselors wouldn't freak out. "Where we found the second key," he told them. He and Nova had shown the other campers where they had found it, while they had been waiting to see if Zed would be okay. They were hoping more eyes would mean, if there was a clue about how to get the third key, someone might spot it. "There's a hill on top of it." "Thanks," the girl nodded. "Take care of her." He gave a firm nod and led Nova outside. He didn't dare risk trying to fly with her so jittery and out of sorts. So they walked in silence until they reached the sprinkle of rocks on top of what they'd secretly called Firefly Hill. The stars that night had looked like fireflies in the sky, and it just stuck. They sat down on the grass beside the rocks that led down to the lower chamber, Victor rearranging Nova's blanket that she had clutched around her to make her more comfortable and cushioned, leaning against the rocks himself. He didn't care for his own comfort, only hers. "You okay?" he asked after a moment, when she seemed to be more fully there. She swallowed hard. "Bad dream." "I get it," he nodded. "Wanna talk about it?" He knew it had something to do with him getting hurt. Someone hitting him with a fireball. But just because the dream featured him didn't mean he was entitled to know more if she didn't want to share. "It was my dad," she began after a few minutes, reaching out to take his hand. We were climbing up the tower and one of his fireballs got through." She looked at him. "It hit you." Her voice cracked. "1 minute you were right next to me, smiling. We were almost there. And the next," she flinched, thinking about it. turning to press her face into his shoulder, not even wanting to remember it. How he'd seen something. Her father launching a fireball at him, only for the wind to cause it to veer off course, about to strike her. How he'd twisted to the side, moved in its way. How he'd fallen. "Hey, I'm here." He leaned over to kiss the top of her head, his thumb drawing patterns on her knuckles, not letting go of her hand, pulling her from her memory of the nightmare. "I'm all right. No burns," he added, before rubbing the tip of his nose on her head in jest. "Unless you'd like me to take my shirt off to fully check." That earned a chuckle from her, and when she pulled back, she was smiling. "There she is," he breathed, always so caught off guard by her smile, and how her eyes sparkled. "My starlight." He tilted his head a moment. "Is it weird that your people are named after light and stars and things, but none of you have ever actually seen any stars other than the sun?" Nova turned to look at the dark sky, knowing he was asking partly out of genuine curiosity, and partly to distract her. Normally, she wouldn't let him get away with that, but right now, all she wanted was to be distracted by him. And having him beside her for a while longer, his voice a calm and continuous thrum in her ear, reminding her that he was alive and well and with her, that was what she needed more than anything else. "Which one's that?" she asked, pointing at one, leaning back against him as he wrapped his arm around her, his chin on her shoulder, his chest to her back, so she could feel his heart beating. Hear every inhale he made, so she'd hear it being easy and not twinged with pain. He spent the rest of the night whispering star facts and star lore in her ear until she drifted off, and stayed awake well into the dawn to make sure she slept soundly, only drifting off when the first light of the sun began to cascade across her face, feeling her dreams would be safer in the daylight. His last thought as he fell into dreams of her was that he really needed to invest in some coloured pencils from Sunnyside. The light of the sunrise playing across Nova's face was one of the most beautiful sights he had ever seen, and he couldn't wait to capture the moment on paper one day. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed this one. So, really lovely thing about this. This was partially inspired by a comment I made. The author, FireFly4, had already written the majority of this, but I left a comment on the previous one asking for a very specific one-shot, and I think she wrote a few points from the prompt I made into this, and the very next one I'm going to do, which is a one-shot, is entirely based on the comment I put. How awesome is that? I also love just how they can feel each other. I know I keep saying it, but it's awesome. Anyway, you guys know the drill. Like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. Make sure to check out my Patreon and Coffee accounts. Links are both in the description below. Have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye, my guys, gals, and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another video. Take care.